In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to create a list box in an Android application. But not just a plain list box, we're going to make it a complex list box. So we're going to have it show more complex information like icons and text in a more interesting layout. So I've got a application created, plain default sort of hello world application, and I've got a piece of text here on my application activity that's going to just be some text view. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a list view below that. And then we're going to look into our Java code and we're going to figure out how we can populate that list view. So let's start. Let's put in the list view. So on the left, under the composite, we can find here the list view, and I can drag that out, put that in under here, and make sure that it binds, because I'm using a relative layout, binds to all four edges, including underneath my text here. Now, of course, if I were to run this, it's not going to do anything interesting because we are not putting anything in these boxes yet. To do that, I've got to actually do a bit of work through my Java code. So let's first give this a name. And so let's call this cars list view. We're going to make it display a bunch of information about different cars. So I'll click out. It's going to go through and update the file, making sure the refactoring takes place. So let's just look at our XML to make sure that it all looks good. I've got here my list view, and it's going to be aligned to the left and below, matching the parents. So it looks good. So let's now see what we can do. Well, before we actually start to put in the data into the list view, we've got to come up with that data ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this sort of object-oriented fashion. I'm going to create an array list of car objects. Now, to save time, I've already created a car class, which is just a plain old Java class. I've got here the 4 different fields that I'm going to store, all private, which is good object-oriented encapsulation. And then I used Eclipse. What you can do is, I'll just show you how to do that. You right-click, and you go down to the source, which is going to be Alt-Shift-S. Let me just do that so it comes up on the screen. Alt-Shift-S. And then I can say I'm going to generate the getters and setters. So generating the getters and setters here, and I can say just generate all, select the setters, or pardon me, I just want the getters. So select the, let's open this up. And so I'd say select getters, and it would select those and generate them for me. I can do the same thing, Alt-Shift-S, and I can say generate me the constructor. Generate constructor using fields. And I can select all the fields. I'd click OK, and it would give me exactly this constructor, which I already did. So now that I've got the class behind the scenes, I can go about and create my array list of those. So inside of my main activity, I'm going to create a private array, or let's say private list. I always want to go with a higher type, and it's going to be a list of cars. So car, I'm going to call it my cars. Equals, well, we need a new array list of car and the constructor. And of course, it doesn't know either of these two classes, so I could go Control-1 and import them, or I can go Control-Shift-O and generate all the imports automatically. Save that, we see the error goes away. So now I've got a list of cars. Of course, there aren't any cars in it. So let's create a function to populate that. Populate car list. I can go Control-1, bring up the options, and Eclipse is going to allow me to create the methods automatically. So in here, what I'm going to want to do is just begin to add them. So we can do this in one line, kind of a bit of a hack, but we'll make it work. My cars dot add, and I want to create a new car. And we see here I've got the constructor. So that was Control Space brings up the constructor information. So I want to give it the make. Let's make it a Ford. Let's make it a 1940 Ford. And then it wants to, it wants the ID for an icon. Well, what's that going to be? So if we come back into here, we see that we're going to store the make, the year, an icon. So we can actually represent a picture on the screen of it, or something for it, and then a string to describe the condition. So let's come back to the icon in a second. I'm just going to put in a 0 for the moment, for the icon. We'll figure that out in just a moment. And then the last thing is I got to put in a string for the condition. So I'll put in here needing work. It's a pretty old car. It's going to need a bit of work. So that's going to be fine. It's going to build nicely. But now I need some icons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in some icons into this drawable -hdpi folder underneath my res folder. This is a resources folder. Again, under here you'll find, for example, your layouts, values for your strings.a or strings.xml. So under here we're going to put in our icons. I just happen to have found a collection of icons that you can get for free, and I've renamed a few of them to be meaningful names, and I'm going to copy them from my Windows Explorer. Done that off screen here. I'll come back in here. I'm just going to right click and select paste. That's going to drop all these icons in here. They're all PNG icons. For example, I'll double click on one, bring it back on the screen here, and that's the bug icon. They're fairly big. So we can see here they are 256 pixels wide. So that's bigger than I need. But that's okay though, because we're going to tell the Android that we want to resize them inside of our list box. So now I can specify what those are going to be. Having dropped them in here, the project would have rebuilt, and it would have regenerated my gen folder, which has the R file in it. So I can say R dot, and now I'm going to say drawable dot, and then here I have all of the IDs for the icons that are sitting here. So I can say, well, let's make the drawable for this a help icon, which is there we go, help. Now I can copy and paste this line a number of times and then retype in all the extra information that I want. I happen to have done that before while getting ready for this, and so I'm just going to paste it in. Here I have a whole bunch more information. Again, I'm just switching over the makes to random things, years to random years, and then I'm picking different icons as I go. I'm using the same one a couple times in one place, but that's fine. And just drawing it different, giving it different descriptions. So now, when I run this, I'll save all the files, run it. Again, we want to run it fairly early, fairly often, just to make sure it's going to work. But we're not doing anything really interesting yet. We're just populating a list. We got to put it on screen though, so that's going to be the next thing we got to do. We've already got our list box set up, but we don't have anything in it. So let's look at how to do that. Well, we want a custom layout to come up in here. We don't just want some random icon and words, so we actually have to come up with that layout ourselves. There's lots of power here. So under layout, I'm going to right click. I'm going to say new and new Android XML file. So normally I could pick if I wanted a linear layout or whatever. Here I'm going to say I want this to be a relative layout. So I'm going to make it to be a relative layout at the top, which gives me the ability to kind of come up with a fairly powerful layout. And I'm going to name this to be item view. Again, this is going to be one per item, so that's going to be .xml. Complete that off, and I'll go finish. Alright, and I think it actually already pulled up a existing copy of that file, so let me just go in here. Yeah, okay, it actually found one from before that I was using. So let me just get rid of all this content, and we'll come up with our own. So this is what you would have gotten in your editor, just a relative layout with nothing in it. So we go into the graphical layout, and we see here that there's simply nothing there. It looks like it's going to be an activity, but what really is going to happen is we want it to be kind of like this size on the screen. It's going to be a little small thing. So we can just start to use the top part and be careful about the amount of space we use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in an image view. So an image view, that's going to be my image that I want, and I can select what resource is going to be shown. I'm going to pick, for example, the bug to start with, just to get something on the screen. Later on, we'll automatically change them. So of course that's quite huge. So what I want to do is I want to resize it. So I can set the maximum height. Go over here onto the right hand side, and I'm looking for the maximum height. Maximum height and maximum width. So here's the minimum height and width. And oops, sorry, I got to click on it first. That'll help. And let's try that again. So minimum's there. We're looking for the maximum. Here we go. Maximum width, maximum height. So I can give it any size I want. Let's just do 80 dp, and that will be a reasonable size for when it comes up. Oh, and then the other thing I've got to do is I've got to tell it to adjust the view size. So actually let it to do the adjustment. Now if I go back into here, we see here that it's come up and set that right, except we don't want any margin left or top, so I'm just going to get rid of them. Do that, and then come back into here, and we see that now it's flush up against the top left, just like I wanted. Now we've got the make, the year, and a description of the condition of the car. Those are three other things I want to put in here. I can arrange them any way I like. So let's get some large text, and let's put it here, kind of top left. And I'm going to give it the ID of text, and let's call this make. Again, let it do the refactoring. And I'm going to put in here make shown here. That'll just allow me to get a feel for what this is going to look like when it all comes together. Let's use a smaller text field, and I'm going to put it down here, bottom left, and let's make this the year. So I'm going to call this txt year, and let's give it some. Let's say that was 2000, and then let's also put in some medium, and let's put it over here on the right-hand side. Again, I'm getting these all kind of flush along the bottom. That's going to be good because that's going to be the height of my item when it's shown in the list. Again, the height is very versatile. I can change that any way I like, but I want it to be reasonably short. And then finally, let's put here text, and let's call this the condition. And condition shown here. So that's sort of what we want. Now we could move these around, I can resize them, I could change, put in other sort of pictures, wavy lines, whatever it is you want your items to look like when they come up in the list, that's what you do right here. I'll come back in here just to make sure everything looks okay. Oh, one thing we didn't do is we didn't rename this image view. So I can do that from the XML here. So instead of it being image view 1, I can call it, let's call it the item icon. Now it occurs to me here, I've used these different names, text, for each of these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to prefix them with item. I could have done this when I was renaming it on the previous slide or screen, but I can do it right here. I'll just switch the names of each of these. And now what's going to happen is when these get, when I'm accessing them, I know they're going to be item underscore. It sort of differentiates them from anything else I might be looking at in my namespace. We see here that we've got some relative layouts here I've got to update as well, otherwise they're unknown elements. So thankfully the Android's giving me a little clue on the left here. It's going to say it's not sure what it's referring to. So I want it to be the text make. Here I change this to be the item view, or the icon. It's the icon, the make, and I think we're getting there. Oh, one more thing, got to change this to be the item icon. This is all handled for you when you do these edits through the graphical UI. You can do them perhaps sometimes faster, although a little more bare metal on this side. The other ones it's showing me here is a warning. It thinks that I should put these into my strings.xml. I'd normally do this in my applications, except in this case, it's not not critical to what we're trying to demonstrate. Let's just check out what this is saying. Accessibility, missing content descriptor. Okay, for the moment, I'm not going to worry about that. It's just if you had somebody that wasn't particularly, trying to describe the visuals, that would be useful for them. Okay, so let's now carry on. We've got this item view. How do we use it? Well, almost everything else that we're going to do is going to come into the Java code. So the things we've done so far is we've created the XML that's going to describe our layouts. We've created the car.java to store the data, and we've actually populated it here. Now what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to actually need to populate the list view. So populate list view. So now all we have to do is write this function. I'm going to move it down here to reorganize my Java code. It turns out this is actually a bit more complicated than we'd like. What's going to happen is we're going to, and I can write this code fairly straightforward here, is I'm going to use what's known as an array adapter. We used it before in the last demo on just simple strings, but now we're going to have to do something a little more complicated. So we're going to create an array adapter, and it's going to be an array adapter for cars, handling car classes. I'm going to call it adapter. And now the class here, the class is actually going to be something we're going to implement. So I'm going to call it myListAdapter. Again, it doesn't exist yet. We'll implement it in just a moment. And then I need to set up the list. So I'm going to find the list view, call it list equals, and I'm going to cast it to ListView and find view by ID. And this is going to be r.id. And I should have in here my list view. There we go, cars list view. And then the one thing I want to do is set it. So list.setAdapter, and this is going to be my adapter. Now it turns out that's all there is to it, sort of. All I've got to do now is implement this thing that we haven't yet talked about. So let me just go through and do the imports here. Making sure I get the right sorts of imports. So let's implement this. So I'm going to create a inner class, and let's make it a I can make it a private class. So it's going to be an inner class. I'm going to call it myListAdapter. And it needs to be, as we see up here, it needs to be an array adapter. So I'm going to extend array adapter, and it works on car objects. Got to get extends right here. Extends. There we go. So now we see that car array adapter, we seem to not have a problem. It says, well, implicit super. We've got to add a constructor. So we've got to work on the constructor here. So in fact, what I can do is I can just create the constructor. So public myListAdapter. I don't need to take any arguments in. I don't need the arguments because I can already access all of the things up here. I'm an inner class, so I've got a reference to my outer class, and so I can access all of those elements directly. So I'm just going to call super because I need to call the base class constructor and give it some information. So I need to give it the name of the activity. So that's going to be main activity. I'll copy that. I need to get the pointer to it, so main activity.this. And so that sets up my context. Next, I need to tell it what view is going to be on the screen in the list. So that's going to be r.layout. And we happen to have created here the item view. What is the item view? Well, that's exactly what we created over here. This is what each list is going to have. So that's how I set up the UI. And then the last thing is I need to tell it what objects are going in. Well, I just happen to have a collection of them here, my cars. So this sort of sets us up to be working with the right stuff. Now what happens with that? Well, we've got to actually handle that. So I'm going to, pardon me, I'm going to override the GetView function. So the GetView function is going to be implemented in here, so I can right click, or just Alt-Shift-S, and then I can select Override Implement Methods. And I want the GetView. So here we have the GetView. It takes in a few arguments, and it just completes the override for me. So now what I've got to do is make this work. So there's not a lot of crazy code here. Basically, I'm passed in a view that I might want to work with. Might's the keyword there. And I'm passed in a position. So this is based on this set of cars that I gave it, which car are we currently displaying for? So for example, if it tells me position 0, we know we're coming up with something to display the Ford. If it tells me list 1, or position 1, that's going to be this Toyota. So first thing I'm going to do is let's comment that out for a moment. I'm going to want to find the view, or work with the view that I'm managing. So I'm going to say view and item view. I'm going to take it from the convert view. Now one funny thing that can happen is this convert view coming in is something we can either reuse if we've created one before, or we might it might be null, meaning we don't yet have one. So we're going to have to create one if we need it. So let's check it. If item view is null, we're going to create a new one. So item view equals, now how do we create a new view? It's something we probably haven't done before. The Android actually does most of the work for us. So we're going to have to do what's known as inflate a layout. So get layout inflator. This happens to be, it's going to take an piece of XML code that we wrote here in the item view, and it's going to inflate it all the way into a fully formed object to be going onto the screen. So it's going to do a lot of work for us. So I want to say inflate, and then I give it the resource ID to work with, so r.layout.itemView. And then I'm going to give it the root to work with, so this is going to be the parent. And in fact, we're going to work on the 3-argument version here, and which is attached to root, and we're going to say false. We don't want to attach it to the root. We're going to do our own thing with it, and so the parent comes in here. So this is effectively here, let me just put a comment in here. Make sure we have a view to work with. may have been given null. Okay, good. So now this whole function needs to return a view, so we're going to return that one. Item view. I'll get rid of that line down there with Control D. So now what we need to do is actually populate the list. Well, first we need to find the car to work with, and then we're going to fill the view. So how do we find the car to work with? Well, as I said, we've got here a position, and we happen to know that we're working with this myCars structure. So car current car equals myCars.get position. And that'll give me the car I'm working with. So how do I fill the view? Well, I'm going to work through pulling out each of the things I want to work with, and then I can set up the different components of the view. So first let's work with the image. So I want to get my image view is going to be some, say, image view. I'll put it in lowercase there. So I'm going to do a find view by ID. I'll leave that for a moment. Now I'm not just going to do a find view by ID on the activity I'm in, but I'm actually going to do it on this view that I'm working with here. So it turns out that on every view you can find view by ID inside of it. So I'm going to say item view dot find view by ID. And I'm going to give it the ID of r.id. And here's all the IDs I've got. Notice that I named all mine to be icon underscore whatevers, which really helps me out because now I can say, well, I want to do the icon or item underscore icon. I'll do Control Shift O to manage the imports. Now that I've found the view, I want to set the image. So image view dot set image. There should be something here. Now I can pick an image from a lot of different ways. I happen to have a drawable resource ID. So there happens to be something here for set drawable, giving me a drawable resource. So on that, I can simply call, oh, sorry, wrong one. I want to actually try that again. I want to do set image resource, not drawable. I'd have to actually get it then. And this is just going to take in the resource ID. So I can say car dot, and we called it current car dot get icon ID. Remember, we already passed it in to it earlier, so now I can just use that icon ID. So that's going to set me up with the icon. I'm going to go through and populate the rest, but let's just see if this works. I'm going to Control F11 and then switch to my emulator. So what we're expecting now is when it reloads, it's going to show me a list view here with a bunch of icons in it for all the different icons that I set up for all of the different cars. And there we go. Here's all the icons I set up. Now, remember, we haven't yet overridden this text. This is sort of the default text that we put into our item layouts, the item .xml. And so it kind of just leaves it all in there to begin with. We get the images, great, but not any of this text. So let's carry on and complete this working with the rest of it. So let's do the make. So I'm going to get a text view. Let's call it make view. Make text equals, it's going to be a text view item view dot find view by ID r.id dot item make, and then on that make text I'm going to set text to be, well, again we want to go on this current car. It's going to tell me the answer, so current car dot get make. That was so easy. I'm going to copy and paste this again a couple more times. That's going to handle the year as well as the condition. So the year is a number and condition. So let's call this one year text and condition. Condition. Now, one nice thing here to note is that the lint tool is coming up and telling us there's something that's interesting. We have already found this particular ID once in this method. And so it's thinking, well, is that a possible copy and paste error? That's fantastic, because it is. So I don't want the text make. I'm going to complete that text year, and down here, text condition. So I find view by ID, text condition, they're all text views, and I'm not yet using them, so I'm going to come back into here, paste that, copy this, and paste it into here. So now I need to switch this to be over what I want. The condition is easy, because I happen to get a condition, it gives me a string. If I do condition get year here, I'm going to leave that for the moment. But notice that we've got a problem brewing. I'm trying to set some text, but I'm passing it an integer. This returns an integer. So I'm going to leave it for the moment just so we can see what goes wrong. So I'm going to Control F11. Hopefully I got the right key there. Yep, it says launching down here in the bottom right, so let's see what happens. I'm expecting it's going to do something wrong because I'm trying to pass it in a number instead of a string. And there we go, it crashed. We can see here in my log cat that I've got a problem. I'm going to double click on that, and we can kind of go back up to the top and then surf down till we find some code that we wrote. Problem is very likely in the code we wrote, so Android, no, I didn't write that. Ah, here we go. CA demo, that's some code that I wrote. And now we can check out what went wrong. We see here resource string ID. It tried to treat it as an ID, and it didn't work. So I'll double click on that, get rid of the log cat. It says this line of code went wrong, and of course we need to convert this to an integer or to a string. I can do that in a number of ways. The most simple-minded way is to concatenate it with a string. Of course, it's not the greatest way, but it'll do the job here. The better way is to say that you want to do, I believe, string.valueof or integer.valueof, and it'll give you back a string. And there we have our list. So all the cars, we have a Ford, 1940s, needing work, a Toyota, 1994, lovable, a Honda, and so forth down the line. We can see here it allows me to scroll. That's just part of the list view automatically. And so we got a nice now format. We could have changed this any way we like. We could put something in the top right. We could put more icons in. There's a lot of flexibility there. You see that all we're working with is we created our view ourselves. Over here we put whatever we wanted in it. My car data structure in the background, this is the model, if you will, a model car. It's holding the information that I want to process. And then in my Java code, all I do is I get that and then begin populating the UI very simply. So I can put any sort of thing I want in here that I can populate with my code. Now the one last thing I want to show is how do we handle clicks. It's the same way that we would have done it before with the list view. So I'm going to add another method up here, and I'm going to call it register click callback. Control 1, create the method. Cut that, move it down to the bottom. Again, always keeping my code in order. Why? Because I'm the person that's most likely to come back to this code and try and read it. The better it's structured, the more I'm going to get out of it. So now what do I want to do? Well, it's pretty much the same as I had before. I'm going to find my list view. So it's going to be my list equals list view, and I'm going to find view by ID, and it's going to be r.id. And we call it cars list here. Now I'm going to, on my list, I'm going to set an on, remember, on item click, not just an on click. So an on item click listener. Oops. I want a new, and the type of click we're looking for here is the adapter view. So under an adapter view, dot on item click listener. Put in my semicolon, save that, and it's going to complain that I've not yet, well, first off imported it, and then I haven't yet implemented all the functions. So that was Control 1, coming up with the options that Eclipse was suggesting. So Eclipse loves putting in these sort of nameless arguments. I'm going to go through and rename them just to give them better names. So this is the parent. The view happens to be the view clicked. These two arguments here are going to be the position. And then the last one, let me just make sure I'm getting this right, is going to be the ID. So Let's start by identifying the car that we clicked on. So the position gives me the index into the array list. The array list happens to be the cars and my cars. So let's say here I want to go car. Let's say clicked car is equal to, well, it's under my cars. It's my array list.get, and I'm going to get the position. So that's going to give me the car I worked with. Now I can do anything I liked with it. So I'm going to set up a toast message. So string message you clicked position, which is car make, and let's just go with the make. So clicked car dot get make. That's good enough to show that we can access the information we're interested in. And then I'm going to put a toast. So toast dot make text, and I need to give it some context. I can't use this because I am. Oh no, I could use this. Nope, I can't use this. Pardon me, because I'm inside a anonymous class. So I've got to say main activity, which is the activity I'm in. We can see up here in the top left, main activity.java. So main activity.this gives me the correct context. Some text, which is going to be message. The duration here is toast dot, and let's do a long, and then I need to show. Most common bug when you're using a toast is to forget to call this dot show at the end. So let's run that, and well, let's actually first off see here what's going wrong. It says method is never used locally. So this register click callback is never used locally. Well, I think up here we should be calling it register click callback. Put that in, save the file, and for some reason it doesn't want to call it. Figure out what's going wrong. Well, we check our indentation. See, that looks a little funny. We've got it indented twice. Why indented twice? Well, because we happen to be sitting inside of my inner class. So, indentation saves today. I'm a little too far down in my file. So I'll cut that. Thank you to Eclipse for the warning there. I'll move it up here above my inner class. And so now I've got the inner class separate from this code. So let's try that. Control F11. See, this is from before. I'm clicking, nothing happens. Now when I come back up with my list, it should allow me to click on something, and we can get that message. So let's pick the Porsche, click the Porsche, and you clicked position 3, which is car make Porsche. Why 3? Looks like it's the fourth element. What is the fourth element? This just happens to be 0. 0, 1, 2, 3. So I can scroll all the way down to the bottom. Let's imagine we click on the Moonlander. It's out of this world, and it comes up with the Moonlander. So I could do things. I could switch to an alternate activity. I could switch to some sort of actual response, playing a sound. Whatever it is you want to do in response to a click is now up to you. But now you've got the ability to come up with a nice looking list that you can put all that extra information into. So what have we seen? Well, we saw how to very simply, on my activity, put in a list view. We then realized we had to design each of these items. So we created our new item view.xml over here in the layouts, and we designed it to be all the contents we wanted. We move them around, we line them up. Maybe we decide, well, this is a little too high. I can move it down just a smidge. These are too low. I can make them flush up here. Oops. Again, in a relative layout, it gets a little complicated. That's all now in there. If I were to save that, go back to some Java code, Control F11, it's going to run. Incidentally, if you try and Control F11 and run it from when you're looking at a view, like the XML files, it's not actually going to load for you. Comes up with a slightly better, improved layout there. So we saw that we could create these layouts, update and change them. We saw that we created a model, basically how we're going to store the information. It's always a fantastic idea to try and store your data separate from your actual activity. If you haven't tried that yet, there's another video I put up on how to do that. It's a great idea. Inside my main code, we saw that we could actually create this. We're kind of mixing the two together, but that's all right. I populate my data, and then I'm going to, so in this list, I set up my data to display on the screen. I then populate the view, and the magic here was this creation of the myList adapter. So all that myList adapter did, well, other than the constructor, which tells us what we're working with, is it first comes up with the view to populate, and this is what's going to end up inside of the list view. We then find the element we want to kind of pull information from. This would be my model. And then I just start filling in the different pieces. Anything I want to do, I fill in. And then the Android framework automatically puts that up into the list view and handles the scrolling for me. And the last thing I did was I set up this register for onClick. And it's the exact same code as before, except now instead of just printing out a string from the position, I have to look up, based on the position, I look up in my array of cars, my ArrayList, which car it was that was clicked, and then I can do anything I want with that object. Alright, well, thank you for watching.